Leping Scrade shouted at the elf zombies, "Don't come over here." The arrows the elf zombies shot at him bounced back because of his overpowered outfit effect, which could rebound 100% of enemy damage. The rebounded arrows killed all the zombies. As the zombies died, the Joker, who was controlling them, felt pain in his hand. Frustrated, he thought, even the damage reflected by that passive skill turns into true damage? It looks like this legendary hero has mastered the use of magic. He healed his wounds and, with a grin, said, "I have the advantage of this territory and the magic power of the entire elf tribe's corpses at my disposal. I will find a way to defeat you." The Joker then used Corpse Surge to combine all the zombie corpses, creating a massive monster. Leping Scrade swung his chainsaw blindly, using his chopping wood plus technique, and cut the enormous zombie corpse monster in half. The attack was so powerful that it not only sliced through the monster, but also split the planet in half, sending debris into space. The Joker, shocked, wondered how his strongest corpse magic, of which he was so proud, was countered by Leping as if it were nothing. The true damage from Leping's attack was so intense that it cut the Joker's body in half, killing him with just one move before he even realized it. After the Joker was killed, the corpses he was controlling began to fall. Leping, who didn't realize he had already killed the zombie monster, started shouting again, "Zombies, don't come near me!" He grabbed his chainsaw and charged towards the remaining zombies. Terrified, the zombies, seeing Leping's determined look, got scared and started running away. Leping, without hesitation, began chasing after them. Meanwhile, on the other side, Elizabeth was battling Duck Elizabeth. Elizabeth unleashed her world-destroying magic. Earth recasting, however, Duck Elizabeth copied Elizabeth's spell and used it against her. The collision of these two powerful magics created a massive explosion. Elizabeth, now furious, shouted at Duck Elizabeth, "I'll grind you into powder as punishment for offending me." She then controlled her world-destroying magic and twisted it, capturing Duck Elizabeth in a metal ball-like prison. After securing her, Elizabeth said, "This is made by Leping, but just in case." She transformed into her demon form and used her world-destroying combat art, sever into all two, slicing through the prison ball. However, she suddenly noticed something that shocked her. Duck Elizabeth was still standing, seemingly unharmed, and said, "Know your place, Elizabeth." Frustrated, Elizabeth thought, "How is this possible? Ridiculous. It used my most precious skills to restrain me." Time Seal, Soul Attack, Magic Attack, Infinite Resurrection, and now this perfect replica, all used by such a low-level summon. But then she remembered what Leping had told her. The level of the magic doesn't determine everything. By mastering the principles, a lot can be achieved with little effort, and even the weak can defeat the strong. Reflecting on Leping's words, she realized that he had prepared so much for her. Is this trip to the elf tribe meant to help me see the truth? Determined to win, Elizabeth used her final trick to decide the battle. However, Duck Elizabeth, too, used her perfect replica to replicate Elizabeth's move. Both Elizabeth and Duck Elizabeth pointed their fingers at each other, casting the most powerful technique, Demon Queen's swordless art. Meanwhile, Leping, who was terrified and chasing after zombies with his chainsaw, accidentally sliced through the space where Elizabeth and Duck Elizabeth were fighting. Elizabeth noticed Leping, and the distraction allowed Duck Elizabeth to successfully land a strike on her. Elizabeth, after being hit, landed on the ground and asked Leping what he was doing there. Upon hearing Elizabeth's voice, Leping opened his eyes and saw Elizabeth in front of him. But before he could say anything, his foot collided with a stone, causing him to fall on top of Elizabeth's chest. His face ended up wedged between Elizabeth's large, bouncy breasts. The chainsaw he was carrying slipped from his hands and fell away. The chainsaw's spirit, panicked, called out to Leping, "Don't abandon me." The spirit was really nervous upon seeing Leping and Elizabeth together and started spinning wildly. But then she remembered that Leping's backpack had space magic, so she didn't have to worry she could return on her own. I won't leave you again, Dad, she said, before glancing at Elizabeth. Elizabeth glanced back at the chainsaw spirit, but then grabbed Leping tightly to provoke the chainsaw spirit. The chainsaw spirit returned to the magic backpack, and Leping quickly freed himself from Elizabeth's embrace. That was a close call. It almost ended badly there. Luckily, I found you in time, Elizabeth, Leping said, breathing a sigh of relief. Elizabeth, confused, wondered what he meant by almost ended badly, but then she realized, does he mean? The Demon Queen's swordless art that she had just used was also copied by that thing. But if she thought about it carefully, the copies were all reflections. So the art is reversed when it comes to time and space. If I hadn't been distracted just now, the result would have been annihilation. He knew I couldn't hurt him, but he stopped the attack by distracting me just now in order to save me. Leping apologized to Elizabeth, saying, because of me, we ended up in such a risky situation. I won't do that again. In Elizabeth's point of view, she saw a strong resolve in him. But in Leping's point of view, he was scared and crying, thinking, I said before that I was fully prepared for any dangers during this trip. But without you, it would be very hard to even take one step. I won't dare leave you again. Elizabeth pulled him towards her and said, what do you mean? I don't need you to show me mercy. Any other trials you have, just bring them on. Leping, blushing, stammered, trials? Elizabeth, what are you talking about? His mind raced. Aren't we a bit too close? Meanwhile, Elizabeth was deep in thought. On one hand, you train me and make me worthy of being your partner. On the other hand, you care about my dignity. She then told Leping, you don't need to beat around the bush. I know exactly what you're thinking. Both of them blushed as they grabbed each other, leaning in for a kiss. But just as their lips were about to meet, someone interrupted them. It was Duck Elizabeth, who, in her own language, demanded, what the fuck are you doing in front of me? Leping, shocked, asked Elizabeth, what is that thing? Duck Elizabeth? But he quickly shut his mouth, realizing it might be better not to comment further. This time, Leping was lucky Elizabeth didn't beat him for the slip. Instead, she told him, now that you're here, I have no intention of continuing. She then asked Leping to pack his things. Confused, Leping asked, what do you mean by my stuff? But Elizabeth pushed him toward Duck Elizabeth. Still baffled and not knowing what was happening, Leping found himself face to face with Duck Elizabeth. Nervously, he said, hello, Duck Elizabeth. Upon seeing Leping, Duck Elizabeth used her perfect copy skill and started to replicate Leping. Seeing this bizarre transformation, Leping grew terrified and shouted loudly, Elizabeth, look. However, Duck Elizabeth struggled to copy Leping, as he was the one who created her. Elizabeth observed and remarked, this king saw it. But she was deeply suppressing her thoughts. Resolutely giving up my strongest form and directly copying you indirectly shows that I am not as good as you. Well, I admit this, but I will see how you can crack this special skill of overthrowing the powerful and defeating a self that is as powerful as you. Scared, Leping asked Elizabeth, did you see? But Duck Elizabeth couldn't replicate Leping's body and skills. Elizabeth was genuinely surprised by this. The copy duck, after forcefully trying to create a replica of Leping, couldn't handle his power and exploded, returning to her card form. As the cards flew back to Leping, they changed color from dark to golden. Surprised, Leping wondered aloud, isn't this the playing card I gave to Uncle Boss? What just happened? He then asked Elizabeth if she knew anything about these events. But in Elizabeth's point of view, she saw Leping saying something deeper. Do you see clearly? In the face of absolute strength, these so-called special methods of the lower class overthrowing the upper class will naturally fail. Do you understand? The solution is to make your own strength so strong that it cannot be copied, Leping declared. Elizabeth, disappointed and angry, thought to herself, I am already a 7-star demon god, but I still cannot compare to him. But Leping reassured her, saying, there's still a long way to go, right? Elizabeth agreed, saying, "Of course I know. You want to pursue me, but you're afraid I can't handle it. You want to help me grow stronger, but you're worried about hurting my self-esteem. You act so nonchalant and carefree all the time, and I thought I had seen through you. But every time you get serious, I feel like you have me in the palm of your hand, and it makes me feel ridiculous." Leping then suggested, "Elizabeth, use your teleportation magic to take us all to the sacred tree." Elizabeth agreed and used her force transmission magic to teleport them to the sacred tree. Meanwhile, on the other side, a fierce battle raged as the little girl Annie and the Sword Saint fought valiantly with everything they had, facing off against the enemy with all their might and bravery. Unfortunately, the battle was so intense that both of them lost their lives in the end, but not before defeating their foe. Just as their bodies lay lifeless, a golden light emerged, gathering their remains. It was Annie's doll, Raphael, given to her by Leping. Raphael used the resurrection of the dead magic, bringing both Annie and the Sword Saint back to life. As they began to heal, Elizabeth's teleportation magic circle appeared above them. Seeing the teleportation circle, Raphael said, "Now that the Master and his men are here, I should retire, having accomplished my mission." Moments later, everyone was teleported in front of the sacred tree. Leping looked around and saw the unconscious bodies of little girl Annie and the Sword Saint. He asked Elizabeth, "What happened to them?" Elizabeth replied, "Don't worry about them. First, I want to find out who is behind all this." She used her demonic hand to grab the sacred tree and pulled it out from the ground. Leping was astonished, thinking, "Who is behind this? The tree that Elizabeth pulled out is so disgusting." The sacred tree, once uprooted, appeared grotesque, like a massive cage. Its roots were buried deep in the ground, and it was so enormous that both Elizabeth and Leping seemed very small in comparison. Seeing everything, Elizabeth remarked, "It seems that great changes have taken place among the elves over these 500 years. Suddenly, Leping noticed Bors and Elfie, who were imprisoned within the sacred tree. Shocked, he wondered what was going on. As he rushed toward the sacred tree to save them, the tree suddenly attacked Leping. Fortunately, he managed to dodge it, but the sacred tree didn't waste any time and attacked again. Scared and unsure of what to do, Leping closed his eyes, hoping that Elizabeth would save him. However, the sacred tree wasn't aiming to attack Leping, it was targeting Elizabeth, trying to kill her. But it was no match for her. Elizabeth glared at the sacred tree with angry eyes, and in the next moment, the tree was utterly destroyed. Just when it seemed all was settled, something unexpected happened. The Joker, who was thought to be dead, was still alive. He had merged his upper body with the remains of the sacred tree. Laughing, he said, "Destroying all the plant defenses of the elf tribe, subduing the scattered cartoon summons, and finally completely cutting off my corpse magic. All my plans were ruined by you one by one. It's really embarrassing, but at least we finally meet." Leping, terrified, hid behind Elizabeth and asked her, "Could this guy be an elf?" The Joker laughed and replied, "I didn't expect that the first person to find Elizabeth would be the one who hates her the most." He was delighted to see Elizabeth again, laughing maniacally and expressing his desire to kill her. Seeing this, Leping asked Elizabeth, "You two know each other?" Elizabeth replied, "I don't know him. I have no impression of him at all." The Joker, grinning, said, "Of course not, because I put on this clown costume to erase the existence of myself." He then removed his Joker hat and wiped off the makeup. "Do you recognize me now?" he asked Elizabeth. Meanwhile, in the Dark Demon Guild, Malfoy was attempting to create a clone of Elizabeth. He demanded that Number 24 provide his energy to assist in rescuing Elizabeth. Number 24 unleashed his 100,000 volts of electricity. The current was so strong that Malfoy started screaming in pain as the energy coursed through him.